She backed out of the babysitter's driveway just after 1:30 a.m. Her son slept in the back seat. The streets were bare. The city slumbered. And within the next 90 minutes, both would be dead. No one saw what happened. No one called for help. And for 28 years, no one was held accountable. This is the story of Stacey Ann Falcon, a single mom murdered along with her 3-year-old son on a rural road in Washington. The case was locked in time until a forgotten strand of DNA whispered the truth nearly 3 decades later. But by the time justice caught up, it was already too late for the one woman who'd never stopped searching for it. Welcome. This is Crime Uncovered, where every case has a story, and the truth is often stranger and darker than fiction. If you haven't subscribed yet, kindly do so to stay updated on the latest crimes we uncover. It was a few minutes before dawn, the sky still shrouded in darkness, when a Renton newspaper delivery man turned onto a dead-end street that was relatively quiet. His headlights pierced the fog, shining on something that caused his foot to come off the accelerator. A silver sedan, motor off, door partially open, and then 2 bodies stretched out on the ground next to it. One small, one unmistakably a kid. He pulled over, his heart racing, and reached for his phone. 911. That call would be the portal to one of Washington's coldest unsolved crimes. But it was not a story about a child. Rather, it was a story of a young mom and her boy. It was a mystery that would take nearly 3 decades to unravel. And reality would arrive when justice could never be fully fulfilled. Stacey Ann Falcon was born October 23, 1971. She was the second of 2 children raised in a cheerful home, curious and wide-eyed, always with a pack of friends. Her older brother loved her. Though later divorced, her parents provided her with a warm and teasing childhood. As she matured, Stacey became the kind of girl who lit up rooms. People remembered her because she was kind, because of her laugh, and because of her intense loyalty. She met her first serious boyfriend, John, in high school. The two were inseparable and, after graduation, set off for California to start fresh. Soon, their son Jacob was born. A curly-haired, big-eyed boy who instantly became the focus of Stacey's universe. Yet life in California was not simple. Bills mounted. Stress heightened. Eventually, the relationship deteriorated. Stacey boxed up her things and returned with Jacob to Washington, determined to begin again. She worked long shifts at her waitressing job, rented a small room in an overcrowded apartment complex, and did what she needed to do to keep Jacob fed, clothed, and safe. Despite the stress, Stacey still smiled. She dreamed of going back to school, maybe someday opening her own cafe. But her absolute priority always was her son. By October 1994, Stacey was 22 and finding it difficult to balance work, motherhood, and mounting bills. Her birthday was on a Sunday, and she decided to surprise her mom by going to see her. It had been some time since they'd last seen each other. Work was keeping Stacey busy, and the apartment was far from the family house. That day, though, they celebrated. There are photographs from the day. Stacey laughing, Jacob perched on her lap. It would be the last family celebration they would ever share. A few days later, Stacey organized a night out with friends to celebrate belatedly her birthday in style. She left Jacob with a sitter she trusted and promised to be home before dawn. She danced that night, laughed, permitted herself to forget for a few hours the stresses of single parenthood. At 1:30 a.m., she walked back to get Jacob. They got in her car and headed home. Something went horribly wrong in the span of a few blocks from the babysitter's apartment to her apartment. A little before 4 a.m., driver dropping a package off at a house noticed a car abandoned on a deserted street. Stacey and Jacob lay beside it, dead, shot at close range. Police were on the scene in minutes. The officers looked around and immediately knew something was amiss. The car keys were missing but were found several days later wedged between the driver's seat and the doorframe. Stacey's telephone lay on the ground nearby, and her purse and jewelry had not been taken. This was not a robbery. Then there were the shoes. Both Jacob's and Stacey's were lying some feet away from their bodies, neatly arranged. Also found was 3 white buttons in the ground, not belonging to any of Stacey's garments. Investigators thought that during a struggle, these were torn from the killer's shirt. Near the car, they found worn gloves and duct tape, suggesting that the killer may have planned to tie up Stacey and Jacob, perhaps to steal the vehicle. But when he couldn't find the keys, something went horribly wrong. Very wrong. The coroner's report confirmed that both Jacob and Stacey had died from gunshot wounds. Stacey also had bruises and defensive wounds, deep cuts along her arms and hands, presumably sustained while fighting with her assailant. Dirt in her socks suggested she had been running barefoot. Investigators believe she may have tried to make a run for her car and escape, but she never got the chance. There was no sign of sexual assault. Not yet, anyway. The case was getting weirder by the second. Police canvassed the neighborhood door to door. Several residents reported hearing shots and a woman screaming around 2:11 a.m., but no one called it in. Shots fired, they said, in that neighborhood were too commonplace to be noteworthy. There were no witnesses, no obvious motive. So the detectives turned their attention to Stacey's inner circle. Friends, family, exes. They spoke to John, Jacob's father. He was cooperative. Nothing raised red flags. Days turned into weeks. The trail grew colder. Then a break, or one that seemed to be. 2 weeks following the murder of Jacob and Stacey, a third body was found. A man named Scott was found in the trunk of an abandoned car. From his brother, Scott had gone to visit a man named Vince to get paid for work that he hadn't been paid for. Scott and his brother installed high-dollar stereo systems in cars. Vince had welched. That was the last time Scott was seen alive. When the police finally caught up with Vince, they not only found Scott's blood in his apartment but also determined that he had been using Scott's credit cards after the killing. Under questioning, Vince spilled another bombshell. He said Scott had confessed to the murder of Stacey because she had planned to reveal an affair. Vince accused Scott of being involved with illegal drug sales and argued that Stacey had threatened to report him and Scott to the police. None of it made any sense. Scott's wife said he was home that night. His brother described the affair as pure fantasy. He said Scott would have told him they were close. Neither of them, he said, sold drugs. Vince's story unraveled. Police thought he was trying to deflect attention from his own crimes. In the end, Vince pleaded guilty to killing Scott on grounds of self-protection. And what about his accusations against Stacey? The investigators put those aside. There was nothing to support his claims. And once again, Stacey and Jacob's case grew cold. For the next few years, the file gathered dust. But Stacey's mom refused to give up. She called every few months, wrote letters, pursued leads, but the detectives rotated out. Some retired. The case was supposed to be handed over to Seattle's cold case unit, but that unit shut down due to budget cuts. Then, in the early 2000s, there was a new tip. A detective was contacted by a prisoner. The prisoner said that another inmate, Charles, had admitted to killing Stacey and Jacob. He explained that they used to work with Stacey at a local cafe and dealt drugs on the side. He alleged that Stacey had threatened to turn Charles in. Police were doubtful, but with no other leads, they followed up on it. They had sent gloves and duct tape from the crime scene back to the lab for DNA testing in the hopes that newer technology might be able to tell them what 1994 technology couldn't. But the lab had a backlog. Detectives were told to wait a year for results. In 2002, the call came. There was a DNA match, but not for Charles. The DNA was from a man named Jerome Jones. Jones was not even on their radar screen. His record was lengthy: robbery, car theft, drug offenses. But most unsettling of all, 1 year after Stacey and Jacob's murder, Jones murdered a businessman outside his California residence. He was sentenced to life in prison in 1998. As detectives dug deeper, the connections mounted. Jones had lived in the same apartment complex as Stacey. He'd even worked at the nightclub where she'd celebrated her birthday that night. Police traveled to California to question him. He denied everything, said he didn't know Stacey, but more evidence came in. DNA under the fingernails of Stacey matched Jones. Swabs taken from her mouth also matched. Suddenly, after all those years, what had been an enigma had a face. It was further discovered, horribly belatedly, that Stacey was sexually assaulted. Her killer tried to cover that up. But the DNA did not conceal the crime. Detectives built a case and took it to the district attorney. But instead of charges, they were informed that the evidence wasn't enough to ensure a conviction. The DA requested a full crime scene reconstruction. It's unknown whether it was ever completed. Jones was never charged. And worse, none of these developments were ever relayed to Stacey's mother. She kept calling and asking for updates. No one returned her calls or messages. No one told her that the man who had murdered her daughter had been identified and left uncharged. Time passed. Leads dried up. Her sister, who had worked alongside her to dig into the case, passed away in 2017. But Stacey's mother kept going alone. Then, in 2019, this cold case was found by one reporter in Seattle. He was drawn to the unusual element in the crime, the shoes, the buttons, the silence. He contacted Stacey's mom. They reopened the files together. What he uncovered surprises even the veteran investigators. Jones has been a suspect for this crime since 2002, which is more than 15 years ago, and nothing had been pursued. He phoned a retired detective. The man admitted they did have the DNA findings but didn't feel they were conclusive enough. Said he had too many cases pending. The district attorney told him the same. Said it wasn't his job to keep the family updated. The reporter penned an exposé. It went viral. The public pressured. New detectives reopened the case. As they sifted through the evidence, they were appalled. DNA, the connections, the timeline, it was enough. It had always been enough. Then there was a dangerous twist of fate. Jerome Jones, he was serving a life sentence for the California murder, was unexpectedly paroled. He was coming out much sooner than anyone had expected. Washington prosecutors moved quickly. In 2022, they formally charged Jones with the murders of Jacob and Stacey Falcon. He was arrested when released and extradited to Washington, where he awaits trial. Stacey's mother didn't live to see it. She passed away soon after Jones was charged, after waiting close to 30 years for justice. Prosecutors laid out in court papers what they believe happened. Stacey was attacked by Jones after she had dropped off the babysitter. He may have followed her from the club or chosen her randomly. He likely attempted to carjack her car or assault her, and when she resisted, he attacked her. She fought. He shot her. Then, perhaps realizing Jacob had seen the entire ordeal, he shot the boy too. Jones left his DNA on her body, on the duct tape, and beneath her fingernails. Yet he left her mother in silence. Jones pleaded not guilty in May 2023. His trial is pending, but the evidence is overwhelming. He will never walk free again if convicted. Took 28 years. 2 innocent lives lost. A mother's tireless quest. And a community's indignation. But the truth, hidden under silence and red tape, finally emerges. In the end, the truth did not come from a witness, a confession, or a tip. It came from beneath Stacey's fingernails. From the fight she would not give up. From the quiet evidence she left behind. But justice, when it is delayed, is costly. And the single human being who carried this case on her back, Stacey's mom, didn't live to see the man who was finally charged with killing her daughter. She died with questions still on her lips, and no one to give the answers. Jerome Jones is in a cell today, awaiting a trial he ought to have received 20 years ago. And though a court can deliver a verdict, no judgment can reclaim the lost decades, or heal the silence that ensued. What happened to Stacey and Jacob wasn't just a crime. It was a failure of urgency, of follow-through, of basic humanity. And it reminds us of something we far too easily forget. That the dead do not speak. So the living must speak for them. Thank you for watching. Every victim deserves their story told. If you found this story shocking and heartbreaking, subscribe to Crime Uncovered and help keep their memory alive. What do you think about Stacey's murder? Leave your thoughts in the comments. Until next time, keep questioning everything.